Hey guys, this is part two of and this is the last part of the frigate. We're going to build the rest of the boat here today. And you can see that from the last one, I did a few more embellishments to the top deck. I added, I finished the captain's wheel and added some lighting and things like that. This is really about the lower decks. And what you're seeing me do here is prepare the lower deck using whatever it's got in common with the upper deck. So lighting, you can see through that grate there. You can see I've placed my staircases. I've got masts that I want to go through the entire length of the ship. So I've also placed my masts down on this next level. And I brought the hull down as well, just the same exact shape I started with. And then I'll probably make some modifications to that. Here I brought all my cannons down as well. The frigate as a class of ship is very low to the water, and it's meant as an escort vessel or a fighting ship. It's meant to come with a lot of weaponry, and rather than being used for shipping, it's being used for for warfare. It's low enough to the water line that even in choppy waters, a frigate can still battle. So this is really battleship, and you'll see it from its design kind of focused on that. What I'm doing here is just making sure that I'm blocking out the middle correctly. I know that I'm going to create a cutout, and rather than having to cut it out from the sides like I did in the last video, I'm going to cut it out from the middle. Just better planning ahead of time. You can also see, as far as what I'm doing, just to lay down the walls, I'm using the same color scheme that I used before. And as I start to put porthole gaps in here, I notice that it's giving me a problem, and I know it's going to be a problem because Dungeondraft doesn't like when you've got too many curves and you're placing too many portals or windows on it. So as I'm wrestling with it to see if I can get it to fix that, I realize I just don't want to bother with it. And so I'll end up here just placing the walls as individual points, and that's going to give me a lot more control. It means I can change things later, and it's not going to mess up the an entire section of the ship, which can happen in Dungeondraft. And I just go and I kind of retouch it and fine tune it a bit. And I decided that I want to make a little bit extra room. That's a lot of guns. That's plenty of weaponry. I want to create some rooms for other things to happen. So I'm blocking out what I think is called a forward deck there on the right, and then the captain's quarters at the back of the ship. And I don't like the transition from the light wood to the dark wood. So I'm just putting in a stair railing as just a way of finishing that transition. I'm pulling a couple of metal pillars, I think they're called. They're from the new Forgotten Adventures mining pack, which I continue to find more and more use for. There's just a lot of really great engineered objects in there and materials that you can use to make lots of things. Now, here I realize that sun is going to be coming through these portholes, or moonlight, even if this is in darkness. And so I'm attempting to draw my shadows in a way that is implying that light is coming in from the outside. This is a lower deck. It's going to be shaded. You'll see here in a second how I handle that. So there will be, it's a good opportunity to use lighting to set a mood. These boxes also come from the mining set. I think they're just a really nice box for holding stuff. Those are just colored orbs. There's a colorable orb that you can use for a lot of different things. In this case, they're cannonballs. And if you saw my galleon ship, very similar setup. I really like the layout of the ship, though, in terms of being able to do some kind of encounter on this level. It's a lot of space to operate in. And for this video, I'm making a nice clean ship. When I actually release this map, I'll do a lot more sort of embellishments and small details just to kind of finish it up. That's part of my process, is continuing to refine each map until it's a very done, very complete asset. And think about the layouts of your maps, not just in terms of, you know, what needs to go in there, but, you know, really imagine you're living or working on the ship and what sorts of things would need to be in place. You know, just the fact that those TNT barrels are tied down. Now you're looking at this in time lapse. This whole video is around 30 minutes long, but this is about 3.5 hours of actual work. So, you know, these things aren't fast. And by the way, that's not counting the first couple of hours just to build the top deck. And now what I'm doing is I'm making sure that I'm planning now how this deck accesses the deck underneath it. And in this case, I decided to make some custom trapdoors. You can get these. There are assets that have the trapdoors and the ladders already made, but they can clash with the style, so I'm just making my own. And again, I'm just using some pieces from the mining thing there to create some doors, and I think they're pretty believable. They really look like open hatches. I added a little bit more hardware to make it look like, you know, it's got some kind of latching mechanism. But, you know, those little details make all the difference. And of course, that's just the floor that you're seeing, the same floor, but it's got a semi-transparent rectangle over it. And it just implies that you're looking down into the floor below, which I really like that effect. More elements that already look finished from the mining piece, from the mining assets. And of course, now I need to make these staircases stand up off of the flat ground. So I'm using the shadow path with grow and shrink in the right places, just to make sure that it casts the right shadow. And you can see at this stage, you know, I continue to build my shadows out because, as I've said before, they help me visualize the space. It's never too early to start to, you know, give your boat some dimensions. Here I'm doing the cutout. This is where cargo would be lowered. The cargo for a ship like this is really mostly going to be rum and food for the sailors. I'm using the same technique I used above to basically make some custom wood framing, and then of course making everything look three-dimensional by just using some properly placed shadows. Here in the captain's room, I want a lot of light. If you've ever seen pictures of frigates and other sailing vessels, the captain's room has this sort of great ambiance. You can see the light coming from above, which I just really love. I just used some point lights and put them in the proper grid. And here you can see I'm running into a problem with windows again. So instead of placing an actual portal, I'm going to place a window as an object, and I'm placing it above the wall line. So those windows, unlike other windows, are just objects. Now what I want to do is I want to create a separation between the lower deck and the upper deck. And here I'm at the upper deck, just making sure that my shadows are going over the staircases properly. You can see still have some fixing of staircases. Just make sure they all line up. And now on the lower deck, I've got those shadows placed, but of course it looks weird. So I'm going to cast the rest of the lower deck in shadow. And you've seen me use this technique before, like when I did the tavern. And I love this. It makes it look like the sunlight is hitting in the interior, but it's obviously not getting to the rest of the lower deck. And this is where lighting becomes important. And even at a daytime battle becomes an opportunity to do some dramatic lighting here on these decks. I'm lighting up everything in general, and then I'm putting little point lights on all of the cannons just to really make it look like there's light coming in from those portholes. It helps the cannons not only be seen by your players as they're walking through, just appreciating that they're there, but it also just helps you make a more believable scene. Now you saw me skip a lot of this adding furniture. I do furniture in a bunch of my other videos, so I thought for time I didn't need to draw quite all of it. And here I'm just doing some of the standard embellishments. I'll come back and do some other things, add a few little more details here and there. But this is the captain's quarters, obviously. And this is a very large room. If you think every square is 5 feet, this is certainly larger than it needs to be, but I thought for dramatic purposes and to have just a really showcased room that this would fit well in this area of the boat. I embed everything in shadows, as you've seen me do before, just to nestle it into the scene. And I'll come back later and I'll do some work on like that transition from the wood to the tile, for example. But little details like that, like you wouldn't put, you know, a stove over wood necessarily. Now I'm up at the upper level and I have to enclose these elements of the captain's deck that are sticking out. And this level needs to stand on its own as its own image, so that, you know, when I make this a placeable image for a VTT map, for example, that it's got everything complete on this level. So I'm just making sure that I'm recreating what's down below up above. And I think it gives just a fantastic shape to this boat overall. This sort of captain's quarters that sticks out. And you can see I'm finishing it. I'm even going to do a wibbly wobbly line here just to make sure that even if I don't have transparency turned on, or if that level below isn't layered on top, that it still looks like a complete level here up above. Now the forward deck, you can see I changed the dimensions a bit. Always try to remember to put a bathroom in. A lot of map makers forget that. Players never seem to miss the fact that you forgot to put a bathroom in. I even put one of those porthole windows in the bathroom because I thought that would be kind. And imagine how your players are going to move through this deck. So they're going to come down that stair and then they're going to be able to go left or right, and just how they move around, how they get to that stair down below. There's a rope path tool available with Forgotten Adventures. I'm just finishing it off with a wibbly wobbly line so it's not quite so obvious the transition here. I like the hardware rings of the lantern, so I'm just hiding the lantern underneath walls and whatnot so I can get the ring from it. And now I'm adding a drop shadow, and you can see these shadows I'm adding here. Krager's Pack added recently a double path, so it doesn't have a hard line on one side. And it lends itself really well to casting shadows from things like fence posts, or from fences and ropes like you see here. And you can see just a couple of shadows, it really lifts those hammocks right off the deck and makes them, you know, look like they're really suspended there. Now, because this is a boat, I try not to put too much clutter around that's loose. You never really see that on a boat. Everything's tied down or it's in drawers or cabinets. So I'm attempting to, you know, put elements in here that I think would be suitable for being in a moving ship. I've got chests, I've got bundles of what look like could be, you know, rigging or sleeping bags or hammocks or what have you. And I'm making sure that I'm putting shadows over at level 400 and at level 100 and even in the mid levels, just over and under everything so that everything nestles into the scene the way that it should. I'm putting a little light coming in from the porthole windows. And finished it off with something on the ground just to help break it up. I may come back in here later and break up some of these spaces a little bit more. We won't do that for today's video. Okay, now we are at the crew quarters, and I am blocking out the quarters like I did before. I'm using the same shapes as a starting point, cutting and pasting them in. I will change their shapes here because obviously the boat changes. This is now under the water line. And here, because I'm so close to the bilge, which is the bottommost part of the boat, that you can see how I'm adding this little flank to the sides, and I'm changing the direction of the wood because I believe that in this section of the boat, you do start to encounter the outside hull going in. And so this is just a way of showing that, you're now, in a smaller area, the floor is not going to be quite flat there. And of course, I'm matching up all of my ladders so that they make sense. And then I'm doing the same point lighting system I did before because the sun really does make it all the way down here to the bottom through that grate. Making sure that I'm getting my same hex codes, that my walls are the same. I'm turning off shadow for all the walls because I'm going to build my own shadows. And here I'm not going to use the same wood color. I'm going to go with something lighter. This is the crew's quarters. I imagine that they're going to use more readily available wood, not so ornate, not that dark wood. And I just want to get a feel for how my rooms are going to be laid out here. I may have a party that makes this their base someday, and I want there to be sufficient living quarters that they would be happy to have this be a base. So I'll have some crew's quarters, and then I'll have a lot of the area, especially in the hold, will be set for, hammocks and things like that, and, storing rum and the things that they need for their voyage at sea. So as long as you're doing doors and walls, you can play with your layouts. Here's where I'm going to really shape the front. I'm just going to do it manually just to give it the shape of I think that the boat would have at this level under the waterline. I'm going to put a brig in the back. Just a good plot device. Having some place where you can keep a prisoner or where your party can be kept prisoner. Just important to have some of those points of intrigue with any map that you're making, just in case your DMs want to use it for different plot lines. Again, doing my shadows, doing them early. That's going to be where the cook makes dinner, so it's got an open portal there. Anywhere I have an open portal, I'm just making sure that my shadows are joined together. There's the brig. I put some cage elements down for doors, but I'm going to change that later. I don't really like the options presented to us in Dungeondraft or with Forgotten Adventures for doors, barred doors. And whereas the galleon had beds, I opted for hammocks in this case. It really feels like it is a smaller ship. It's not a hotel on the water. And going for furniture elements that are more drawers and where things can be contained, not loose and rolling around the ship. You can see that little detail there. I even changed the tiling here so that it followed that sort of curve of the bottom of the boat. And I'm putting these elements at different levels 100, 200, 300, just so I can put the shadows in between them in the right places. You'll see me put beds and tables typically at level 200 because I need to put things above and below them. Cabinets will often go at levels 300 or 400. And then stuff on the ground will go at level, 100 or under the 200 level. And then because they're fixtures, I like to put lighting in early. Just know where my lights are going to be. I often use them to mark doors. I'm using some of the same elements I used in the level above just to finish those off and make them match. And I'm using pillars to cover up any joints that look odd. These are pillars, those are pillars set at level 700 above walls. Now I realize there's an asset that I like. It's that rusted metal component from the mines thing. I think it makes for a good top of a door that might be a security door, like a barred door. And just trying to break up that space. And of course, this is below the water line, so your lighting here is going to be important. And then I'll do some more diffused lighting throughout the whole thing just to make sure it's got the right lighting at a low level. And now what I realized is I do want my masts to go all the way through the ship, and I didn't do that here. And so I'm gonna change my design just to meet that objective. This is how ships are built. They work like this. The masts do, really technical. And would anybody ever notice this? Probably not. But it was a design goal that I had in mind that I wanted to try and achieve. So here I am just making accommodations. I got rid of a whole room just so I could make sure that these masts were coming all the way through. Plus I realized I needed some storage here anyway. All right, so now that we've changed that around, I'm going to give some metal bases to these pillars or to these masts just to make them look like they're really reinforced. And now I'm going to lay out what I think the hold would look like. And I'm going to build this in such a way that it can be used for storage. But in this case, it's going to primarily be used as crew quarters. This is a large crew it takes to man a frigate. And this is where they eat and sleep. Adding a few more rooms, you'll see me in the future when I do other versions of this, I'll make some of these rooms alternative versions, like I might have a wizard room. I might have a room that's like a map room. So while these are mostly bedrooms now, I will create alternate versions of these just for usually my patrons who want to use these maps for multiple campaigns. Here I'm going to make a makeshift table, just using some elements. There's going to be a lot of rum here. And in this case, the crew just actually made a table with some rum barrels and some boards. And I like how this room is set up. I think if there was a battle here, I can do some things creatively with just having to, move through the room. The center of the room, obviously, you can move through, but, there's some modules in Foundry, for example, that let you make rough terrain. So there could be a nice battle here with the crew or somebody else. And if you want, all my patrons will get this map And you can make it your own. If you're a Dungeondraft user and you want to turn this room into an encounter room, or you want to make this whole ship a dark ship and a ghost ship, something like that, I'll do some variations like that for my Patreons. But by all means, get this map and redecorate it in whatever way that your party would work, or your storyline would work. I will be attempting to put the ship underwater, have an underwater wreckage. So I'll do some pretty dramatic changes to it to give it that look and feel. But that's an example of how, once I have a template for a map made, I can go in afterwards and just with Dungeondraft really quickly and easily change the entire motif to make sure I can use it for some other capacity. Okay. So now we're going to work on creating masts. I'm just going to show you a couple of ways that you might approach it. Here I'm just using some stair pieces. And then I've decided that instead I'm going to go with, and you can see I was playing around with some other masts and sail types, but in this case I want to make a true kind of galleon sail. And so I just used the bar path to make a bar. I think even with the little elements of metal that are on it, I think it lends itself pretty fine to this effort. And you can see I'm approaching my mast. There's actually two different levels. I've got the center mast, which has like the crow's nests on it, and then I've got the elements of the mast that extend out that hold the sails, and those are on two different levels. And there's a reason I do that. It's because I want to be able to remove that center mast. In a lot of my battles, I want all of the space of the deck available, and so I don't want that mast necessarily in the way. So I make it a removable asset when I release this map. You can also see, and I don't know if I recommend this to everybody, but I am making custom sails here, and it's very, very tedious. I'm just using the path tool. I'm putting multiple, or the floor tool. I'm putting multiple floors on top. I'm using a semi-transparent floor as over a non-transparent floor, just so I can get a lighter shade than what's available to me with the current Forgotten Adventures pack. And I'm using wibbly wobbly line and shadows, and I am really painstakingly drawing these different sails in such a way that they look like they're really on top of each other, and that they vary slightly in color, and they're made from the same but potentially different materials that haven't been replaced over time. It's very tedious to do that, and it's very difficult to operate across different layers to try to get these things to look proper. So I don't know if I recommend this. You can certainly simplify your approach to sails. I really like the look of it when it's all said and done. And I do it with certain hex codes that I can change the colors of these sails later. So I can make a blue sail or a red sail. And here I'm using path tools to make those bar tops look more rounded. And I'm going to do the same thing over here with all of my custom sails. Very specific hex codes, darkening them, adding semi-transparent ones over on top of them, cutting and pasting so that I have the same shape, but I can change the shape to a transparent shape. And it's just a lot of like wrestling with, Dungeondraft to try to get those sails looking just right. You can see it's a pretty believable outcome, pretty satisfying too, compared to what you've got available. Like if I just went with the assets that are available, There's some decent sails in there, but they just don't achieve what I think you can achieve when you kind of hand draw these things. Just some more elements here just to look like there's, hardware on the rigging. You don't have to get into too much detail, but I even like to put some ropes kind of fading in. You can see everything kind of fades into the deck because it fades into the other center mast. And that's also a trick it's hard to achieve, but you'll see when we get to the end what it all looks like together. And I find it very satisfying. I think it looks like I am seeing through those normally visible elements. And now I'm working on the center mast. I'm working on merging it with the sails so that visually it looks like it's one piece, even though you're looking at two separate layers. You're looking through, or, two superimposed layers right now. I'm going to just create some ladder access points so there's a way up. I like the idea of making this a little bit more transparent. You can see the wood underneath. And now this is very tedious. This is taking the sails that I made at the lower level and extending them through so they look like one contiguous piece. And you'll see me here. And by the way, you're looking at this at about 16 times speed. Just because this section took so long to get these sails to look right and to do all this fine tuning that I didn't want to make you sit through all of it. But we'll slow down here in a bit. This is just to give you an idea of how much work it takes to get something, an effect like this to actually work. And, I needed to get all of the colors to match, and, it's just a lot of work, wrestling with the different layers that you're on here. But at the end of the day, I find this really satisfying. And once you've built it once, you've got it forever. And your players will never see most of this detail. They'll never notice it. They'll notice it subliminally, but they won't typically, they're not going to appreciate how much time you put into this. And again, if you want to get these maps, they are available to Patreons. It's a good 4-hour head start, 5-hour head start on your own ship, making it your own. You can see you don't have to go through this this level of customization with your own mapping if you don't want to. I was a little bit smarter when I went to these sails in the front. I planned a little bit better with those after having gone through the pain of the last one. Really love that wibbly wobbly line. It makes something like this possible. Making these sails look finished just wouldn't have been possible without that new innovation. So this is the actual final ship. You're looking at it in Clip Studio, which I use to actually cut things out and make things the right size. But this ship came together really nicely. You can see the level of detail here, and I will be going back and adding a few more embellishments as just part of my process. You can see this ship looks really nice. And here I can show you what it looks like when you remove the center elements, so you have the full ship available for battle. When it gets into Foundry and I have multiple levels to play with and some teleporting, it'll be a lot of fun for my players to have battles and encounters and do storylines on this ship. This will go really well with the docks that I've already deployed. It'll go really well in naval battles with the galleon and the trireme. So as far as like building out a really usable fleet for any kind of ocean encounters, this is I think a really good addition to to my portfolio. And I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you learned something. I'd love to see some ships that you guys build. If you want to see more tutorials like this, let me know. If you have questions about something that I did inside the ship, just let me know in the comments, and I'll certainly try to help out. This map is available, or will be available soon this month, to Dungeondraft users and Patreons, and hopefully, hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I will look forward to talking to you soon.